I, Robert Mugabe, in terms of Section 96, subsection 1 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, hereby formally tender my resignation as the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe with immediate effect.
Well, those are the news that came to light, of course, just after about 6:30 or so yesterday evening. After 37 years as the president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe finally resigned yesterday. Now, Zimbabwean former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa is expected to be sworn in as a head of state within 48 hours. ZANU-PF's chief whip has said Mnangagwa will serve the remainder of Robert Mugabe's term until the next general elections in September next year. So the question is, what's next for Zimbabwe after Robert Mugabe resigned? To elaborate more on that, we're now joined on the line by human rights lawyer Nqobizitha Mlilo. And in studio, we have an Africa expert, Peter Fabricius. And you at home can be part of our conversation by giving us a call on 011-447-1742 or 1620. And your comments are also welcome on our Facebook and Twitter pages. So let me start the conversation with you, Peter, because you are in studio with us. When that news came, you know, building up to that, it looked like Robert Mugabe is digging himself in, and actually that the powers that ZANU-PF is supposed to be having, it looks like they actually don't have, and that he's not hitting to the voices of the people on the street until it hit 6 o'clock and those news came through. I mean, the process to that, what should we read into what transpired?
Yeah, there was a very strange process that ensued. You know, a part of it was that the military was trying very hard to avoid the impression that there was a coup and that they were forcing Mugabe to resign. And so, you know, we had him appearing on TV on Sunday evening, and he was supposed to resign and he didn't. A lot of people thought, what's he up to now? Has he got another trick up his sleeve? Because he's had so many tricks up his sleeve over the last 37 years. But I think what was really happening was that, yeah, he might have been frustrating the military, but I think they was just stood back very patiently because they knew this impeachment process was underway. They got the whole of ZANU-PF to just switch sides completely within a few days, which was an extraordinary affair. And so it was really just a question of time. And the moment that Mugabe realized that the impeachment was imminent, then he decided, look, the more dignified exit is to resign. I don't think he wanted that blot on his record that he had been impeached by his own party.
Right, of course, also joining us on the line is Nqobizitha Mlilo, who's a human rights lawyer. Thanks for joining us. Nqobizitha, what should we read into what transpired into the process of yesterday? And there's also a lot of questions, obviously, when we look back at the turn of Robert Mugabe as president, especially the human rights violations in the early 2000s into the mid-2000s. When things are moving forward, how do we address some of those things that have happened as far back as then?
I think it is impossible to miss the moment that says Zimbabweans have been under a dictatorship for the past 37 years. And any kind of movement, in particular the resignation of Mugabe, is a cause for celebration. Based on a superficial level, that the most articulate advocate of this dictatorship of ZANU-PF has been removed. But what really for me this means is that ZANU-PF has been able to solve its succession problems. And having resolved its succession problems, it is certainly going to enter the 2018 elections as a solid bloc. And therefore, the prospect of changing government in the form of defeating ZANU-PF at the poll increasingly diminishes with time, which therefore signals to me that opposition politics in Zim will take a dive, and that the possibility of continuously having a militarized state with a civilian face in the form of ZANU-PF will continue. So as far as the human rights aspect of it is concerned, I'm not as hopeful.
All right, so let's just speak to a little bit to that, Peter, because that also raises a questions like with everything that just transpired in terms of like, do they go straight to elections, or do they correct some of those issues that have affected them in the past?
Yeah, you know, that is, I think, the next big question. So elections are due like mid-year.
Yeah, in September.
I thought it might even be earlier because the last ones were July 2013. But yeah, they may have a bit of leeway. So do they go into elections, or do they form some sort of government of national unity? But I mean, the objective of a government of national unity, I don't think would be, well, not necessarily to try and correct what's happened. It would be to try and prepare decent elections. But I mean, we've been through this movie before, which is what bothers me. You know, we went through that. I mean, SADC with South Africa at the lead of this long process of trying to ensure that the 2013 elections, the last elections, were free and fair. And eventually they were just completely rebuffed by Zimbabwe. And likewise, we had a government of national unity from 2009 to 2013, running up to those elections, which was also supposed to put Zimbabwe back on the correct road, but it never really did that, mainly because ZANU-PF gave up no real power at all, you know. So it wasn't a genuine government of national unity. The danger being that if you do the same thing again, you just go through the motions of a power sharing arrangement, and at the end you're back to square one. So what if the region has any role? And I mean, there's a big question about the region's role now after this. It would be to try to somehow ensure that those elections are genuine.
Okay. We're also taking your calls this morning on 011-447-1742 or 447-1620 on the line. We have Nqobizitha Mlilo, who is a human rights lawyer. Now, Nqobizitha, my question to you is that looking at how everything happened in the last few days leading up to yesterday, Zimbabweans were very determined to lead this process themselves. And you know, when we're talking elections, we're talking involving everyone else. They were not very open in showing in terms of like what SADC's role is actually. I mean, there were confusing messages of the president of South Africa and the president of Angola could be going in there yesterday, but then when the event turned out the way that they did, they were not going. So that clearly shows that they were not up to date in terms of like what was transpiring in the country. What does that speak to?
I think SADC's credibility and the African Union's credibility in Zim is basically non-existent. SADC and the AU has been viewed by most Zimbabweans as having been complicit in the human rights violations that happened in Zim, in the sense that they condoned or protected Robert Mugabe and not faced up to him to say that those human rights violations that were happening in Zim must stop. In the formation of the government of national unity, as your guest in studio is saying, basically pacified an otherwise angry nation and sold a dummy to them, and all this was presided over by SADC. So the credibility of SADC and the African Union in Zim is really low. And therefore, that's why Zimbabweans continue to project themselves as a people that were prepared to chart a new way for themselves, irrespective of the involvement of SADC. In fact, some Zimbabweans were actually saying that they don't want the involvement of SADC at all.
Okay, so in terms of like moving forward, clearly those SADC, the African Union, you know, need to be involved somehow going forward, whether it's straight to elections or there's a conversation of government of national unity. How are they going to sort of like navigate through that?
Yeah, I mean, what Nqobizitha says is absolutely true. I think there's very low credibility of those organizations. And so they need to be very, very careful about how they involve themselves at all. You know, my concern about where Zimbabwe now stands is that this euphoria might evaporate if we see the new government performing like the old one, which a lot of people suspect it will. You know, Mnangagwa is not the world's greatest Democrat. He was the guy who was accused of, suspected of being behind a lot of the really tough measures that Mugabe took to stay in power. The Gukurahundi massacres that you were referring to earlier in Ndebele and Matabeleland in the mid-1980s. You didn't mention that, but the attacks on the MDC at the time of the 2008 election, the kind of rigging to the extent that there was in 2013. So we don't have any guarantees that he's going to be radically different. I mean, what he is different in, I think, is that he has a desire to actually reform the economy, which his right-hand man, in a way, Chinamasa, the finance minister, was beginning to do before Mugabe fired him a couple of months ago. But in terms of political freedoms, we don't have any guarantees as things stand now that there will be such, you know. So we may find that the region is called upon in that sense. But and this time, if they need to really step up to the plate and ensure that those political freedoms are
Nqobizitha, you're still on the line. Your final thoughts. These political freedoms, because from what our caller is saying, you know, the realities are like that. You know, whether it's straight elections or whether it's a government of national unity, Emmerson Mnangagwa is the candidate that's there, but is he really the best candidate? And what happens next for the country?
I couldn't hear what the caller was saying, but from if I can decipher from what your question, my own respectful view would be that we've changed one dictator for another. And while it is important to celebrate some form of social movement in the departure of Robert Mugabe, I am not convinced that we are better off. In fact, I think this is an upgrade of dictatorship. So I think that there will be serious human rights violations that will continue. The history of this man, Emmerson Mnangagwa, is checkered with brutality. And therefore, I'm not as optimistic of the future, at least as far as the respect of human rights is concerned. I think we are up for a very difficult time. And I think Zimbabweans, once this euphoria is gone, when they sit down to start to reflect exactly as to what exactly has happened, I think they are going to start having very difficult answers about the future.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it at that with Nqobizitha. Okay, Peter, let's take your final thoughts. Those are the realities of Zimbabweans. Some say it's better to know, to go in knowing exactly what you're dealing with. Then you can be able to manage that process. What next?
Yeah, I think my thought, and I agree with that observation, but, you know, history works in funny ways, and I mean, the first step was to get rid of Mugabe. I can't believe that things could get worse. There will be maybe a struggle to make sure that they are better. That is for sure. And that is a real challenge. But you know, it might be that the military almost unwittingly has unleashed this absolute demand in the Zimbabwean public now for real freedom, which they might themselves find a little bit difficult to bottle up, you know.
Because once you've tasted freedom, it's very difficult to take it back.
Yes. And look, that has a potential for violence and conflict. That is the danger.